Good afternoon to all. I request all of you to come forward a bit so that we can be much closer to the speakers. Uh, we are beginning our second session. As said earlier, our second session will consist of speakers from different backgrounds speaking on various aspects of NEP and how it will affect research and funding. Uh, Before we go into the go with the words of the speakers, we'll read a few solidarity messages that were sent for our convention. I request Dr. Chaitali Sengupta, Vice President of DRSO, to read the solidarity messages. Uh, Dr. Chaitali is a postdoctoral fellow at IIT Roorkee. Chaitali, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Chaitrali Sengupta and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow from IIT Roorkee. We have some solidarity messages from various persons for this program. And am I audible? Yes. Solidarity message from Dr. Paramita Chaudhary, Associate Professor, Department of English, Ashutosh College, Kolkata. Education, as we understand, it is a continuing organic process that goes beyond degrees and is transformative both for the individual and for society. Also, it should show an awareness of the hard realities of daily life in our country. I will give a simple example. During the pandemic, thousands of students found themselves outside the digital classrooms because they did not have smartphones or data. We are a plural society, our diversity is our strength. A policy where one size fits all or is made to fit all definitely needs some rethinking. While the emphasis on education in the mother tongue is laudable, it becomes incumbent on us to remember that we have 22 scheduled languages and each of these languages is someone's mother tongue. When one language, Hindi, is sought to be made the sole language of knowledge and power, it becomes in effect a tool of discrimination against those not born to it. Nor should Hindi be imposed as a language of research and pan Indian higher education. Research has its own problems, and it is these which need to be addressed. Research institutions need autonomy of thought and action. They need incen- incentivization so that the best brains remain in our country instead of drifting to the West. Research needs solid long term investments, and this is exactly where a funding deficit has made its effects known. It is a problem that needs to be addressed and urgently if we are to move towards being a knowledge society. As issues are being taken up, I wish the convention all success. Next, a solidarity message from Professor Mohidash Bhattacharya, retired Professor, Department of Linguistics, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Dear organizers, congratulations on the initiative for this convention organized by you. The initiative is more encouraging as the organizers have attempted to look into the danger of the NEP-20 as a whole. The change of this policy can bring a paradigm shift in the existing infrastructure of education system developed by the people of India since Renaissance period of the country, which was already proved an unsuccessful one. Sorry. Uh, Actually, I'm taking a few minutes to share some of my thoughts regarding the scholar movement. Actually, I am a part of the scholar movement from the very beginning of 2013. So most of my research days were spent in Kolkata and in research institutes, and I am in research institutes of Kolkata. Presently, I am in IIT Roorkee. Many of my fellow scholars told many things about the present research scenario, the rat race between the and how this thing is creating a very adverse effect on the total research environment. On this line, I have something to say that I have also put previously also. I think that as there is the corporate culture of research is very much entering in the government institutes also. I have not been in any privatized institutions till now. For a very few months, I taught in a private university, but I was not in a research, not as a research scholar. Anyway, the scenario in the private universities are even worse. But even in the government institution, you can see that many government institutions like different IITs are facing suicides of many research scholars, students. I think we should take account of this type of incidents and the overall research environment, which is not at all healthy nowadays, and it's a very much competitive. It's good to be competitive, but it's kind of a rat race between the faculties, and they are actually inflicting these things, and sometimes even their frustration towards upon their students, and I don't think that that is a very good thing. That cannot be a good thing also. And I want to share my thoughts that we should move forward to recognize ourselves as a workforce, so that we can have certain legal rights to uh, secure our mental peace, secure our time to get involved in research and other things, and we should not be at least abused in our laboratories, which is, I think, nowadays scholars are facing very much. So, first of all, we are doing this research for ourselves, for the knowledge, for the improvement of the knowledge system. Everything is okay, and we know that the philosophical aspect of this and the long term how the NEP will change everything. I know that things take time, and the changes, if there is a positive sense, if we can put forth to it, it will take some time. But immediately, what we need, that we should be recognized as a workforce. We work in a certain sector, but we don't have any legal rights to proceed when we are abused. So I think that we should work on this factor also, that whether we can assure some of our benefits and some of our rights to secure ourselves. I think it is important, and if the members of the DRSO and who are involved in this direction.
Thank you, Chaitrari. We'll have speakers who have studied much on how on different aspects of research and the funding aspects of research. First, we'll have Dr. Saman Chattopadhyay. He's a professor at Sakura Center for Educational Studies, and his areas of interest include economics of education, with focus on its
Very good afternoon to you all, and I really appreciate your initiative in this regard. It's way the national education policy is going to bring about changes in the way we do our research. So it's a laudable attempt. I mean, you have all assembled here to discuss. We have to be concerned. We have to keep ourselves acquainted with the changes. We have to read the policy document very carefully. We have to really understand the possible implications on the teaching, learning, and research. I will basically present a macro picture to you. Say that the education policy document, the National Education Policy 2020, what is the political economy of this? True, if you read the draft of the National Education Policy 2019, you will find that the challenges being faced in the education sector has prescriptions argued to have been arrived at. But there is a political economy approach. I mean, there's a political economy to the entire education policy document. There are four aspects of it. First of all, see, the major challenge for the government is that when the graduates are entering the job market per year in the range of 5 to 7 million, the economy, the structural composition of the economy, agriculture, industry, services, are not undergoing that rapid transformation. Private corporate investment is pretty low, and agriculture would still constitute the bulk, and the majority of the labor force, to the extent of 85 to 90%, are involved in the employed in the informal sector. So the industry is unable to absorb, and to aggravate the problem, the introduction of AI, digitization, and the technology also creating a major change in the way that demand for skill is emanating from the job market. That means there are some jobs which are in high demand, and a majority of the jobs are set to disappear or they've already started disappearing. So we have had a jobless growth, right? And this is a major challenge for any government that when they when they contest in the next election, how to deal with this challenge. So what we find, therefore, in the national education policy is a major thrust for vocationalization. So the present gross enrollment rate is around 27.3%. It has to be raised to 15% by 2030. But the national education policy reminds us that the 50% of the learners, school education to higher education, should have exposure to vocational education by 2025. So you can understand that the major thrust is on vocationalization. Even in the last year budget, you will see that how the vocationalization is getting linked with apprenticeship program and the MSME sector. The second, that the public funding for higher education in particular is unlikely to increase in real terms, in per student term and in real terms. But you have to raise the enrollment rate to 50%. So what do? You use digitization of the academic space, increasing use of technology in the higher education institution to overcome this problem. And this is why the national education policy was announced after the first wave, right, in July 2020. To seize the opportunity, because we had to shift to online education per force. And that was the opportunity that the government was looking forward to, that how you can transform the sector by bringing in this digitization of what we do in the institutions. So digitization is helping the government in 2-3 different ways. First of all, the average cost of education would fall. So the commensurate, as the enrollment rate rises, there would not be any commensurate rise in the budgetary allocation for higher education. Second, the government says that if you choose the courses from the e-platform, Swayam and e-Parshala and all those e-platform the government has institutionalized. Uh, the quality of education can be increased. You understand the reason behind this? Because the same courses can be replicated in number of times. And this is what the government says. And the government also believes because of online education, access would cease to be an issue, assuming away the digital divide that exists in the country, because the remotest part of the country can access the e-platforms, the courses being offered on the e-platform. So it is political on the part of the government to shift, to transform the education sector from in-person gradually towards an online education. And you can see the policy measure in this regard. Academic Bank of Credit is an example. Academic Bank of Credit means it is actually a student-centric higher education reform the government would like to argue, because the students are being given the freedom to choose the courses across the institution, and now they are being also given the freedom to exit and enter as per their conveniences. So, in the name of student freedom, what we are going to witness is that the gradual transformation of the higher education sector. The third aspect, which I have not elaborated, but you can see that if you want to remain in power, the transformation, education is for self transformation. So, the way we think, the way we conduct, the way we behave and exercise our choices, that has to be changed. And that can change through education. So, education here, indirectly, if I may speculate, that this online education would ultimately weaken the student movement, the teachers movement, and weaken the relationship between the teacher and the student, as the students are now all over the place, because now they have been given the freedom to exercise their choices for the courses. So it is not only rewriting of the textbook in history and elsewhere, but it is also the ambience, the entire structure is undergoing a transformation. The fourth is to create more space for the private sector. So if you read NEP, it is very clear that NEP is criticizing the private sector for adopting commercial practices which are inimical to the quality of education. So CSR or philanthropic investment are being favored. But if you look at the entire approach to higher education reform, we will find that whether it is edtech companies, whether it is foreign university, or it is one way of creating tremendous problems for the public funded universities, that means the private participation in higher education is set to rise. If the government thinks that construction of a market can change the higher education sector, that's a typical neoliberal approach to higher education reform, they will playing field. That means the public funded institutions have to be adequately funded. And secondly, you have to take care of the access issue. That means if you don't fund, not only there does not exist a level playing field, but also the access question is severely going to be compromised. So if if you think from the perspective of the government is precisely doing what the education policy is supposed to be doing. Government is vocationalizing and moving and pushing the system towards an online education through ABC and all. I mean, you will see the changes over a period of time. It will not happen immediately, but it will take a couple of years before you see the changes. Let me share with you some numbers from the budget before I come to the funding issue. I was looking at the budget, and the budget reflects the intention of the government. How much was allocated for 22-23, how much we could spend with the revised estimate, and how much we are planning to or contemplating budgeting to spend in 23-24. There is a budget for world-class university, the institutions of eminence. You must be aware of, and the revised estimate was compared to the budgeted estimate, 1,700 student financial aid, the revised, that means we could say what we have for. But so for the 2023, the budget was 2,600 crore. But this year we are going to spend less, 1,000 to compare with the budget estimate for 2022, 23. For ICT e-learning, when you enter the job market, because if the institutions are put in an hierarchy, and the hierarchy is going to be more and more accentuated, then what happens? Education becomes a positional goal. So those who are from the top quality institutions, the elite institutions, would have a favorable treatment in the job market because of the brand value of the institutions. So the merely, if you are asking for access and access and access, does not really solve the problem if the higher education system is increasingly getting differentiated. And it's a part of the game. All universities are not like Harvard and MIT, even is there more differentiation between the system, and is a good point here. That not only that world-class university, the influence are going to be increasingly appropriated or cornered by the top quality institutions, and this is going to be a edX and not a much higher than the skill-based courses offered by the government. So those who can afford will be faster than you to enter the job market and grab that.
the center, Sakirushan Study Center, we discuss a lot on this issue, and it's a part of our like life also, right? It's a lifetime engagement with the ideas of education. It's not for as a professional, but also as an individuals, we always keep this idea of education in our life. Having said so, it's good that there was so many laid out what exactly the problem of education. Instead of repeating, because I'm also largely concerned about the political economy of education, also being a student of sociology. My concerns perhaps two, three. One, with regard to the idea of very education and how the post-colonial India at the policy level debated this issue. One of the very critical issue was that the language of democratization and education. So I was looking at some of the policies from, say, from independent onwards, and how different approaches to the policies on education shape the very idea of being educated, right? And then 70s, and there is a very paradigmatic shift happening from 70s to 80s, and that shift was very much visible from 90s onwards, right? In this entire period, say post-colonial uh, India debated at length on education, and I was reading anthropologist who was interviewing some of how they debated this issue, why they took long time to declare education as a fundamental right, so on and so forth. And then you get the sense that how much our parliamentarians, they are serious on this matter of education, right? Everybody wants to be educated, but as a political discourse, it took a long time to settle some of the very fundamental idea about right to education, right? And it's very interesting, a coincidence story about the how the Britishers introduced this idea. This idea of colonialism expanded, and they took less than 20 years to settle the idea of right to education. Right? In India, it took almost 50 years to settle. But there's a huge difference in issues. It's not merely about how people are thinking about education, right? How public are at large concerned about the issues of education. Because if you look at the changes happening in the educational system, certainly there is a people's movement. There's a force behind it, right? In the parliamentary debates, it's very clear. There's a tacit assumption about the idea of education all about. So, to my mind, this is also a process of democratization of education, right? And that also reflect on the society. India being a democratic society, or one of the largest democracy, one of the successful democracies in the world, and one of the youngest democracies in the world. And if at all you claim to be, to my mind, it's because of education itself. And the second one, education never been trying to homogenize. But because someone says that there's a diversity of institutions, I don't think we at any moment we can, any university or any number of institutions can make any system of education homogeneous, right? Because we are dealing with the people and their mind. So no university can homogenize. No history, no university, a single university can homogenize our minds, even including our own university. Right? No, actually, precisely to diversify. The very act of learning and teaching or being educated is diversifying. It's never, even the history also. So no university is going to try to homogenize. Even if it is a market thing, it's very difficult to. This is one of my first assumptions is that's maybe it's a myth creating that the universities are going to be homogenized, especially in Indian context, South Asian societies. It is very difficult to make any university or any mind to think about other way people think. That's why the politics also out here in Indian context. And the second thing is is maybe what does it ask me to also at any moment we where you locate a researcher or a student and we are at the receiving end of it. When you listen to many of the intellectuals that they are the most vulnerable, I also began to realize the fact that the students are the most vulnerable sections in the domain. Fortunate again the universities also put. Right. Why we put this like there is no clear definition on in the policy circle also in the policy discourses also. Uh, there is no clear definition on who is a student, what he does, what he wants to do. Right. But someone said they look at the market. Sometimes we try to define ourselves, someone who is trying to get a relatively good job in sociological social mobility, sounds of myself as a student. And that's to my mind, I was listening, I was also this kind of probably you are going to look at some of the issues like a funding. To my mind, is very critical. Right. And this voice has to shape the politics of education to my mind. Right. This is what to my mind to share some of my views also in this regard. To just critically look at what is happening as far as the education system is concerned, being researchers or teachers or students. It may be influencing the result because I'm also part of policy team thinking about very seriously about how to make these policy discourses much more meaningful to the students, right? It could be very interesting that the student organization of this such should voice it, and you should also reflect on what are the real problems, right? Some of the problematics I am going to identify when I was looking at the research. One is the fact that is it really we are adding to the existing body of knowledge, or are we contributing to the existing body of knowledge? Am I really contributing? I was in my classroom also. I was talking to my students. Are we really adding to the existing body of knowledge, or are we reproducing something comes from elsewhere? Right? That's a very important question is that because sometimes policymakers also ask us, so what are we going to contribute to it? So PhD thesis would not contribute anything to the body of knowledge. The policymakers that has to have some contribution to the policy. Probably our PhD work would not contribute to. But nobody reads after having PhD awarded. At the end of the day, we produce some books or papers. Otherwise, these documents are not going to add to the existing body of knowledge. Right? My question is that are we really contributing to the body of knowledge in the university systems? Or are we really looking at how this process of knowledge is taking place? And I'm taking very critical view on about that. Whether we produce the knowledge or we are looking at the very process of knowledge domains, right? But also that we are contributing to the knowledge, we should ask ourselves that. Are we adding to the existing body of knowledge? Is it relevant? And relevant for the policymakers, so on and so forth. Now, the policy circle believes that what we do in the university system, have degrees or PhDs, are not going to contribute anything to the existing body of knowledge, other than you are getting a credibility for yourself. Some degrees you get it. That's it. This is also a myth. Don't you think so? This is also creating a myth because universities are very advanced research centers. Many universities are very advanced in research centers. The diversity is there.
And there is a hierarchy also, we know this. And we ourselves create the hierarchy about the idea. The very idea of research process itself is inclusive to my mind. Unless we have a consistent dialogue between the teachers and the students and the object, the third dynamic is called object of study, there is no knowledge production itself. The very process of knowledge has to be, it's not a one-dimensional. Human minds and ideas. There is a triangular model, right? So where we call it the knowledge germinates, new ideas come out. So if I were to look at the process of knowledge production, there is a collaborative approach, right? No matter whether it's a science or social sciences, it's a play of the mind, because we all are involved in it. And we express in different style and languages that we know. We know linguistic problems, right? Many things we know. But the human mind is functioning and working, right? Reflecting on many things, many issues. This is a very complex domain. The very body of knowledge we are approaching to the process of knowledge production. It's a very complex process. To my mind, that's what the students, doctoral students in the university system, right? We are dealing with very complex issues. They're not simply for just more instrumental nature things, thinking that we produce some degrees, all that. So why we reduce this level of discourses, right? Only for universities only produce degrees, credentials, so on and so forth. So from the point of view of the researchers and their perspective on what they do and how they can contribute to the body of knowledge or growth of the knowledge needs to be redefined. That is lacking in the literature, research also. Because because of the demand of the market, or because the students come from different background, they wanted to have a different set of requirements. Society is unequal, right? We know the social circumstances through which students coming from. Therefore, they may have a different approaches to that. But fundamentally, research is all about what, and where is the place of the students, how they themselves should define, right, what this research means for themselves as well as the society. Two things to my mind comes up in the sense that one is that it also liberating force. As a student, as a researcher, when you get into the world of research or research processes, it also liberates a researcher. And that very process is also democratizing oneself, understanding. This process has to take place. They are not merely instrumental in nature. Therefore, to my mind, education and the research are fundamentally democratizing and liberating ourselves. And now the political economy created a myth that this we all run after the market. But market also failed. The last 1 month, how market failed, right? Themselves. So it doesn't prove at all. So because human mind is such, and that's why. The second set of idea, what I was thinking about the students' perspective on research can be more collective in nature, because ourselves also do not. Many of the researchers do not know what your colleagues have been doing, or between the universities what these students have been doing. And then I was looking at I did my own research also to look at how students themselves sharing their knowledge, what kind of research going on. All right, very, very poor. We have very poor idea about how the students themselves sharing the knowledge. We do in our center, in the universities also, sometimes if you have resources, we do young scholars research forums, to ask them to share their thought processes or ask them to write something, so on and so forth, goes on. But the body such, this organization, now students organization also should be thinking about how they think about the research. Right, and that is a resource to my mind. Funding, I understand that. I know the limit. I know the potential, and I know the limitation of this research processes should go on to the market. mind of the young researchers to share some of the thought processes, so that perhaps now we can also think about how the youngsters are thinking about the research all about, and that would define our place in the very domain of the research. Right. And the third dynamics, to my mind, there is a lot of tension going on between this. This perhaps my own reflection on the research. Some of the empirical details come from the field is that um, universities, they are not in the metropolitan cities. Students coming from different background, they they are really struggling to get into the field of research, right? Demands are very high. When you come to the universities, there's a lot of gap between the expectations puzzles, when we deal with these students. Therefore, what are the problems of these students when they get into the institutional spaces? To my mind, these institutions also should create a new conditions to make the students that they also are included, right, in this and their processes. The third dynamics, I'll finish. I am not going to do more issues. The third dynamics to my mind is that the inclusion can also be a bit of a experiential. The one should also feel, not only feeling, but also when you get into the research activities, gives you a confidence that, yeah, working with a group of scholars, working with a body of knowledge would also emancipate yourself, liberate yourself. That is a very interesting experience. Otherwise, what happens? Somebody is working on caste. right? He comes from a different background, and he also feels that okay, I am working on caste issue, so he feels also deprived. A girl study on gender issue, she feels deprived, right? There is economic crisis, I also feel deprived of it. What will happen to economy tomorrow? So the research programs would also allow the students to experience and liberate it and critically thinking about and transforming our society. So the experiential knowledge which we add during the process of teaching or research, I would say would actually liberate us. Therefore, the experience the institutions should also allow the students to experience. That experiences actually liberate the students, emancipate the students, and all the problem which we say that social inequalities, perhaps I'm not saying that completely give up, but rather to a large extent, right? Because sociologists would now say that education is not going to create the social mobility there. 70s and 80s, there was a very interesting paradigm in sociology that the education is going to make mobility. Social mobility. No. Now instead of social mobility, it creates inequality, and the inequality is widening day by day. And the education is also to contribute the inequality and deprived me. When I was thinking about education, when education is going to produce us inequality, and what we are contributing. Therefore, experiential ideas, the students over a period of time generate themselves should also liberate. For that, in my mind, the university system also has to be more inclusive in its approach. All right, so this. Therefore, the institutional support, I think, are not adequate to support what we think about university, more academic independence. At the same time, this is also a collective approach. Institutions and the governing system also should think very seriously about how we can make these institutions are more inclusive. Right? Knowledge produces inequality. Knowledge also produces hierarchy. We know that, but the fashion, the adaptability, resilience. Advanced societies are very good in resilience. And they are able to adapt it. So the idea of inclusion is such. So if the adaptability is such, the advanced societies are far more advanced in their approach to the problems. So they are able to adapt it. So the research at the end of the day, so the idea of inclusion is a political category, and this diversity we should be celebrating. Right? Diversity is not a problem at all. We found that the classroom, it's a challenging question. When you interact with students, see teachers in the schools, look at the students coming from different background. There are a lot of problems out there. The cultural difference between, I know in Kerala, for instance, even Tamil Nadu also now, the migration, right? The students coming from different states, the teachers in the uh, government schools unable to cope up with because one set of language problems coming up. So most of the cities now become diversified because of the migration. Many of the cities, the teachers have this problem. So how they handle these students coming from different background. So language becomes a barrier. Culture becomes a barrier nowadays. We do not consider diversity as a capital. And that is an asset of our society also. So to my mind, classroom is also highly diverse, and accept the fact that the classrooms are very diverse, and we should consider this diversity as a capital than the burdensome. Is that I finish? Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Dr. Maravendranath Bera. He's an assistant professor of physics at ISA Mohali. He is also one of the organizers of the India March for Science abroad version. I welcome you, sir.
Share. Yep. Present. It's not there. It will go. Okay, we start.
Can you hear me? Asif bhai, how to?
Just
Yeah. Sure. Okay, I got it.
good.
So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I must admit that it's quite reassuring that organization like DRSO, the Scholars Organization, is taking up this deep issue of NEP 2020, in particular, the aftermath that we are foreseeing, that what kind of changes it may bring in education system as a whole, even in the society. Two of my previous speakers already made some illuminating discussions, and I will actually start from what Professor Chattopadhyay mentioned in his some of the points actually mentioned there, that new education policy is going to bring some fundamental changes in the overall education that we preview, as well as the way we think. First thing he mentioned, that NEP 2020 envisioning that the entire education to be transformed to vocational education. I fully agree. That means you will be taught only to have some technical skill. And you also wants the whole society to think in a particular way. And now, particular approach that government want the next generation or even some part of this present generation to think, or using this particular approach. So I will start with this Indian knowledge system, and in particular the reality versus myth. As you see the text, can I have a pointer or some stick?
No, we don't have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see this cursor?
Yeah.
Yes. If you look here, in the first the sentence that I have written here, it's coming from NEP 2020 only. It says the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been eternal knowledge and thought has been a guiding light for this policy. I would like to emphasize the word eternal. When we talk about knowledge, knowledge evolves. It develops as the society develops. Already thinking in a very unscientific way. So that means the entire policy, as far as Indian knowledge system is concerned, made on that unscientific premise. Anyway, I will come to this particular what we. So I shall be talking about, like, just to tell what I understand or I perceive as Indian knowledge system, and what the proponents of that particular knowledge system in a sense, and then little bit talking about, in true sense, what kind of knowledge we literally developed in ancient India, particularly its glorious past and the reasons for its decline. And obviously, I will end with the kind of thing we should think, in a sense, like it should be our task in order to really combat this implementation of Indian knowledge system. Okay, so let me start with the first part of my discussion. It's quite a long text, but you may just read the highlighted part in blue. This is the text I have just copied from this NEP 2020. And it says an engaging course on Indian knowledge system will be available to students in secondary schools as an elective. So that means they are actually directly saying that let us implement it without even having much discourse on this particular fact that how reasonable this knowledge system is. Second thing, obviously, many of you already have noted one of the major emphasis in Indian NEP 2012 education to the mainstream. Okay, there are also certain controversies. I also have some points against it, although I'm not sure how much time I shall have to discuss this part. So after the introduction of, let's say, NEP 2020, there had been a lot of things coming on the news on this particular term of the phrase Indian, coming from like Times of India. If you just search with Indian knowledge system, you will see at least 2-3 phrases of news actually coming up. So, for example, several new centers to be open up. Okay, some courses to be offered in various colleges, universities, or even academic curriculum. The education minister every time coming up, introducing books, etc., etc. Okay, I cannot see the screen very well here from here, but at least you can read. Okay, so these are essentially the stream of news that we saw in the last, let's say, 1 or 2 years. But even after having that much of, let's say, hue and cry, apparently for many of us, we have this particular question: what exactly do we mean by Indian knowledge system? It's nowhere very clearly mentioned. So that means we have to have some inference coming from some of the activities that are done by the government on the name of Indian knowledge system. And that is what I'm going to do. Again, it is my perspective. You can contradict. And if there is some particular point you differ, we can come back during the question and answer session. So this is exactly the question: what is Indian knowledge system? And this is the photo I cropped actually from the official website of this Indian knowledge system. Obviously, you can look a lot of things which does not look like scientific. But anyway, let's not argue based on this particular photo, but let me go towards 2 major things that are published by an institute called Center of Excellence of Indian Knowledge System. Recently, that got established in IIT Kharagpur. And they published a calendar for 2022, last year. And let me look at the content there. I did not really could manage to copy and paste all the text they have written there, only the highlights I have. For example, you see cyclic time and reincarnation. We are living in 21st century, and a knowledge system is trying to propagate the belief. On top of that, these cosmic lights and all these claims like space, time, and causation. As a physicist, I understand what it does mean, and it got developed by essentially Einstein in last century. And they claim that all these things, as you can see in this particular screen, is discussed in ancient time. We are doing nothing new. Well, you will have more surprise. 23, again, the same institute, which is called Center for Excellence in Indian Knowledge System, published another calendar. And here, obviously, I don't have the pointer, actually, if I summarize what it says is this one.